Hello, my name is Dave Ratt, and I want to share with you today my strategy towards mixing rock shows or mixing bands live. So I'll show you what I do. At least I'll use the Chili Peppers as an example. I have a couple kick mics, and I always run two kick mics. That way you have a spare kick mic. If one goes down, you can go to the other. Right? They're two different tones, but having a spare is good. I have a snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, rack tom, floor tom, ride cymbal, pair of overheads, and maybe a drum machine or something if there is one on that tour. So there's Chad, there's the drummer. Handwriting's great. All right, so next we got Flea, bass. We run a bass clean, a bass dirty DI, clean DI, dirty DI, and a bass mic. So you get 3 inputs for him. We've got John, which will have a guitar left, guitar right, guitar, center, mono, and then guitar, what we call guitar 3, which is the other rig. And finally we have vocals, where we've got vocal Flea, vocal Anthony, vocal John, or Josh, as the case may be nowadays. There's some other stuff coming off stage, but there's the basic fundamentals of a 4-piece rock band. The key here is when you have your various band members, there'll be certain songs where maybe bass player switch to a certain bass, a little quieter, the drummer will, Chad will play extra hard. Keeping these entities in check so that you're balanced, your mix stays balanced is the key. I mean, you really want to have your drum to bass to guitar level somewhat manageable, and then take your vocals and put those 6 dB on top or so, 3 to 6 dB on top, so they remain clear. And the band still has to maintain the dynamics of the show, but you don't want things to go way out of whack. So how do we keep all these things in check? Here's what I do. I take my vocals and I run them into a stereo subgroup. So here we've got some subgroups. And we'll use a vocal subgroup, left and right. I'll take all my guitars and I'll run those into a stereo subgroup. I'll take my bass, I'll run that into a mono group. I'll take my kick and snares, those right there, and I'll run those into a kick snare group, which is mono, mono. And then I'll take my toms, rack, floor, and they will come down and hit a group, toms, left and right. And finally, I will take my metal stuff. Everything made out of metal, and those will go into the metal group. Left and right. Okay, so now we've got our 10 groups here. We've got vocals, guitar, bass, kick, snare, toms, and metal. These 10 groups are panned out, left, right, mono, mono, left, right. What I'll do now is I'll put compressors. I'll put compressors on each one of these groups, 10 compressors. I don't link them in the stereo. The reason you don't link a stereo group, let's say on the vocals, is that, or let's use a guitar as an example. The reason you don't link guitars is if the guitar is heavy to one side, let's say the guitar left is heavier than the guitar right, it's louder, then it would come out here. If you have your compressors linked, it would sum the two left and rights on the listen part of it, and it would turn down both sides. So it wouldn't rebalance that ratio. The left heavy guitar would stay left heavy. We want these compressors to even that out. We don't want to fix it, but we want it to moderate it. All these comps I run at about a 2-to-1 to 4-to-1 compression ratio. 3-to-1 is my norm. So I'm not using a tremendous amount of compression, which allows, when it gets heavier on the left side, the guitar is heavy to the left, it allows it to be louder, but not that much louder. It still keeps things in balance. We really don't want half the arena or half the venue to have blasting guitar on the other side, not to hear guitar. So that moderates that. That's why you don't link compressors when you're doing stereo. Another reason you don't do that is because if you hit the link and unlink button with something that's stereo and it's got some nice stereo dynamics, maybe toms, you got them panned left and right, it tends to make it sound more mono. It collapses the stereo image. When you unlink them, they're compressing separately, so the stereo imaging is maintained. So now what we'll do is we'll go through and set a ratio on all of these compressors. We'll set them all at 0 threshold, all the way across, and all exactly the same. We'll put them, let's say, all at 3:1 compression ratio. And then the vocals, will set the threshold at, let's say, +4. So now what will happen is, assuming all these instruments sound correct, when you drive them into these compressors, all your instruments will have a harder time getting louder after they reach that 0 dB point, threshold. And your vocals will continue to get louder up to +4. What this does, it forces your vocals to want to be on top. So it'll keep that together. Not only that, if the guitar gets 4 dB, goes to +4, and you're at 3:1, it's only going to go to +1 1/3. So +4 dB over 0 goes to 1 1/3. So you've only gained a dB over, let's say your guitar is right at 0. So your guitar does come up a dB, but not 4 dB. It doesn't step on it. It just gets a little bit louder. So it keeps it in check. So now what happens is your entire mix, regardless of what's going on, it wants to stay mixed. If you've got all your meters about 0, you've got your level set pretty well, you've got your comps all matched, it almost forms an auto mix situation. There's some other things that are interesting about this setup as well. If you take a VCA, now VCA, all VCA is a remote control. Anything assigned to that VCA is remotely controlled by a single fader. You could take everything on your board, all your input channels, and assign them to VCA 1. Or let's say use VCA 10, because we're going to use the other VCAs for something else. And if I bring that VCA up, it's the exact same thing as me going over and having 24 fingers or whatever and turning all those up at the same time and keeping the ratio and balances between them. So it's a real easy way to remote control, turn up all the faders. So we got VCA 10 is all our inputs. Now, we take VCA 11 and we assign all of our groups to VCA 11, our group faders. This is going to be our groups. This allows you to do something really cool. If you bring up VCA 10, you're turning up all your inputs before the compressor thresholds, which means that as we bring VCA 10 up, on your compressors, you have your gain meter and you got your gain reduction. Your gain reduction, as you bring up your inputs, your gain reduction will increase. So you'll start to see more compression because you've turned everything up before the threshold. But if you turn up your VCA 11, which is on your groups, those faders are after the compressors. So that takes whatever compression you have, it takes the entire thing and turns it up. If we take VCA 10 and VCA 11 and we turn up 10 and down 11, we can maintain about the same overall level to the audience, but we're pushing everything into compression. So everything, your mix becomes more compressed and more contained. If you go the other way and you turn down VCA 10, which reduces the amount of compression everything's seeing, and you make up gain off of VCA 11, everything comes out of compression. So your mix becomes more dynamic and more open sounding. This ability to take a fast song and push everything into compression by grabbing two faders and maintain volume, and then reverse that process for a slow song and have everything be very dynamic and open, is extremely powerful and allows you to change the the sonic signature, the way that the band sounds very easily in real time. If you have an analog console and you take all these compressors and you have them all in a rack right next to each other, you can actually look and see, or on the VU meters or on the console meter bridge, you can see vocal, guitar, bass, kick, snare, toms, and metal stuff. And you can actually see your individual band humans and what they're doing. And if all your meters are reading even, you know your mix is pretty well balanced. If you have all your compressors grouped in a certain area, you can look at your rack, you can see what's compressing. You can tell that the guitar player turned up instantly because you can see that he's more in compression than he was before. You can see if a mic's down, if one side of the venue is not receiving guitar, you can see that the left-hand guitar group is down, or whatever it is. So you've got a really good overall indication of what you're presenting the audience. Why do I use stereo subgroups when these vocals, obviously, if I am going to pan them, it might be panned slightly, but not much, because I really want everybody in the room to hear Flea. I want everyone to hear John. I don't want to pan them out. And the reality is, in larger venues and in most venues, a lot of people are just in front of one cluster and they're not receiving a stereo sound from both sides. One of the aspects of this that's important is using the stereo subgroup for vocals is not only to have a little bit of panning maybe on the backgrounds, but the effects for the vocals, the vocal effects, Vox effects, they also are rooted into that same group. And the reason you do that is when this vocal group compresses, you want it to compress the effects as well. You don't want the vocals to become more and more compressed and then have the effects just get louder and louder in relationship. So you want, and you need a stereo group to run the stereo effects. Also, you want to be able to control your vocal entity. When you bring down those vocal groups, you want the vocal effects to come down with it. The same applies with any rack tom effects you're using, or floor tom drum effects. They would be rooted back into there. Kick and snare effects are a little tricky because I have a mono group. If you have enough, you could use a stereo group for that. That would be great. Typically, a lot of boards don't. I'm in the habit of using a mono, but for a stereo snare drum effect, it'd be nice to have the stereo group there. Typically, I just run the snare drum effect mono. What else? Guitars, I do use stereo guitars. There's a left rig, a right rig, and they have different dynamics, so I do need that stereo group, and they are panned out. That is one of the secrets to how I mix rock shows and keep things sounding good and refrain from hovering over the board throughout the show. And I'm actually able to focus on the way the show sounds rather than chasing the various volume levels throughout the show. If I find myself looking at the board and having to turn something up and down multiple times and set up scenes to account for all that, then I really haven't set this up properly. And that's I don't like to be chasing stuff around. I want to look at the overall picture of the show rather than micromanage the actual volumes. I want to listen to the tones of the system. I want to look at the audience reaction. I want to watch the band on stage and be in tune with that and really stay away from that micromanaging of this guitar is too loud, this is too soft, and having to even like ride things like guitar solos. I'd much prefer the guitar player step on a stomp box and have that guitar jump 10 dB, smash into compression here, fattens the guitar up, automatically comes up, but still doesn't step on the vocals. If I got one person singing, lead vocals singing, and then all of a sudden the backgrounds come in, the overall vocal mix compresses and keeps the three vocalists not that much louder than they were with one singer. So the vocal to instrument ratio is maintained. Keeping those ratios in check, automatically keeping themselves in check. And that's what this setup can do for you. All right. Hope that helps. And if I think of something else to share that's interesting, I'll do another video on that. Awesome. So thank you for hanging out, and I hope you found this video and others that I do interesting and informative. And check out soundtools.com. Take a look at the products that I personally designed, some solutions for the pro audio industry, analog over Cat5, a bunch of testers, and other useful tools.
Ratsound.com has got our sales department, rental department, install department. We sell a wide variety of pro audio and AV gear. We do installations, small to large, and we do rentals for everything as small as local clubs and backyard parties, all the way up to Coachella Festival and artists like Pearl Jam, Jack Johnson, Blink 182. And thanks for hanging out.